I want to set the stage here a little bit. You know, if you'll remember, a couple of, I don't know, it might have been a month ago, Angela taught about the indictment, that judicial indictment that Yeshua had with his people, and laying out a case kind of. And today, in the parallel passage that we're looking at in Luke chapter 19, you can see that he talks about their day of visitation. And it's in the exact same context. He doesn't use that phrase in Matthew, but he does in Luke. And I think that there's some interesting things there. And if you look and maybe make a note to yourself that the Hebrew word is pakad, which is kind of like to call together or to muster for review. That's the visitation, that's kind of, and I've got a couple of passages here that we can look at where this word is used that kind of sets the stage for this, what we're going to study today. If you would, take a look at Exodus chapter 32. Exodus 32:34. And this is just after the incident of the golden calf, by the way. Starting backing up just a little bit in verse 31, Moshe returned to Yehovah and said, "Oh, these people have sinned a great sin and have made for themselves a mighty one of gold. And now if you would, forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book which you have written." And Yehovah said to Moshe, "Whoever has sinned against me, I blot him out of my book. And now, go, lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. See, my messenger goes before you, and in the day of my visitation I shall visit their sin upon them." And Yehovah plagued the people because they made the calf which Aaron made. It's kind of a weird literal translation there, but in the day of my visitation I shall visit their sin upon them. So I think in the days of Yeshua, when he mentions this, they're calling to mind these different scriptures that we're looking at here where this word is used. And it seems to be, in the Hebrew of verse 34, it says, "In the day when I visit, yes, I visit." It uses the word twice. So there's that there's some prophetic significance whenever the Hebrew is repeating itself.
So that's that word? The visit is that word?
Yeah, pakad, Hebrews 64:85. So if you look at it in the Hebrew interlinear, it says, "Behold, my angel before in the day when I visit, I will visit for their sin." Now it says pakadi, yufechati. The root is actually pakad, which means to call together. It's like kind of line them up and pass for like a military review is essentially kind of the way I'm looking at it. Now, if you want, take a look at, now this is interesting because Isaiah and Jeremiah use this same term in the same way, but in Job chapter 10, it's used a little bit differently. And I just want us to get a feel for how this word is used and what the prophetic significance is, because Yeshua uses it. Looking at Job chapter 10, verse 12, Job is talking about how he's nothing in front of Yehovah. And in skin and flesh you put on me and wove me with bones and sinews. And then verse 12 says, "Life and loving commitment you have bestowed upon me, and your visitation has preserved my spirit." So that has a more of a positive connotation to me. It's like, Yehovah visiting Job somehow seems to have strengthened him.
Wasn't that some kind of a disciplining or punishing or something?
In a lot of cases, that's the way it seems. This is the only context that I could find where it didn't seem that way. But
Job was being examined.
Yeah, Job is being examined. That's definitely true. But the other places where the word is used is a lot more negative. I'm just saying this one seems
Because
more
he
mild.
passed his examination.
Well, Job didn't sin.
He passed his examination.
He passed the examination. He's, been reviewed and,
Yeah.
Well,
God doesn't...
Yeah, that could be, if your visitation is what he's going to visit your sin upon you. Well, that visitation preserved Job, whereas that visitation might not preserve.
not turn out so well for you if he's visiting your sin upon you. That could be bad. But Job was blameless and did not sin with his mouth, So his day of review was maybe not so bad.
It could be he was still viewing it as a punishment or something, because that was what he was
Well,
complaining.
yeah, he was definitely...
Why these things happened to me? I didn't sin against you.
Yeah.
So he felt like it was a visitation that was uncalled for, and yet later on he realized, wow, it makes me strong because I passed.
True.
This translation in Daryl's too doesn't have visitation at all. It has care.
Hmm.
That's what mine says.
Yours says care.
It says your care has preserved.
Okay. Yeah. Now it's interesting if you look in the oh yeah, no. That's actually that's actually shamar. That's actually preserved. That is a different word.
So
It says, "Thou hast granted against thy visitation hath preserved my spirit." It's a very strange literal Hebrew translation, and some of these, like my concordant literal version says, "Life and mercy have you granted to me, and your supervision has guarded over my spirit." This one uses supervision.
Right.
In the Hebrew, it is that word, but it says, "And thy visitation hath preserved my spirit."
Right. But it's also used differently. Like in Numbers 3:22, it says, "And the oversight of those who perform." In Numbers 3:36, now he appointed duties of the sons.
Mm-hmm.
In Numbers 4:16, it says the responsibility.
Yeah.
So,
And so I have, yeah, and those are just
The
like
faith.
overseeing, the duties of the overseers. But I'm looking at these words in the context of prophetic significance because Yeshua is addressing Jerusalem at that time. So, and if we let's look at Isaiah chapter 10 for just a sec and get into what I think is more directly pertaining to what Yeshua is talking about. If you want to just go right to the beginning of Isaiah chapter 10, it says here, "Woe to those making unrighteous inscriptions and writers who have prescribed toil to keep the needy back from right ruling and to take what is right from the poor of my people, that widows may become prey and orphans their plunder. What shall you do in the day of visitation and in the ruin which comes from afar? To whom would you run for help, and where would you leave your wealth?" So there's the day of visitation. And he's talking, you've probably, I'm sure, read this before. He's talking about Assyria, the rod of his displeasure, his defiled nation. And now look at Jeremiah. Has something very similar in Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 12. In Jeremiah 8, verse 12, it says, "Were they ashamed when they had done abomination? No, they were not at all ashamed, nor did they know how to blush. So they shall fall among those who fall. They shall stumble in the time of their visitation," said Yehovah. So we've got some prophetic utterances in Exodus and Isaiah and Jeremiah that seem to be most poignantly related to what Yeshua is talking about as he is coming up to Jerusalem and he's about to be crucified. So this is right on the cusp of his crucifixion. And if we want to, we can take a look at, I wanted to kind of, before we get into that a little bit, we'll look at Luke 19 to take a look at the parallel passage. But giving you just a time and place, we know from some of our other studies, and I know that you guys have already probably come to this idea for either on your own or through maybe another teaching or something, that Yeshua is most likely entering the city of Jerusalem here for the last time on the 9th of Nisan, right?
Was it the 10th? That's when they examined the lamb. I read
Yeah.
somewhere that while Jesus was entering one gate, the lamb for the Passover, for entering the gate, and the same place what praises was said to the lamb, Hosanna, in the highest.
Mhm.
The priest was singing that to the lamb, whereas the people were singing that to Jesus. I don't know. I just read it somewhere.
Yeah, so right at the 9th or the 10th of Nisan is when he's approaching the city, and of course you know that Bethlehem is where the priests raise these lambs to bring them in for slaughter, and so I've heard some people say he's coming in one gate
Right.
and the sheep are coming in another. I've heard he's coming in the same gate as the sheep, which is there's different interpretations. It doesn't tell us in the text which gate he's coming in necessarily, but it seems fairly certain that.
Should it be the gate facing Bethpage, where he came from? I know, that's where he slept.
Well, no, he did come from Bethpage, yeah, absolutely. And when he's coming, from up in the Galilee region and coming up through this, road
Right.
here through Bethpage and Bethany, and then going into, this is a map that's not
And
entirely
Bethlehem is
accurate.
on the left side.
Yeah. So
it's
he.
possible that they did come into different gates.
Yeah, it's certainly possible, but it seems clear from the textual clues that he is being taken because they have to take the lamb and inspect it for 3 days to make sure it's okay for a Passover sacrifice, and he's going to be inspected. That's for 3 days or 4 days he's going to be on the Temple Mount conversing with the scribes and the elders. Now, note something interesting here is that he in these confrontations that he's having in these next few chapters, the Pharisees are not really mentioned at all. I don't know if you noticed. The chief priests and the elders. So we don't have Pharisees involved
Why
here.
is that?
Because the Zedekim are the ones who have control of the temple.
Yes.
They are
Said
the high
Jesus.
priesthood, and the elders and the Sanhedrin are not Pharisees. The Pharisees are not really the party of power. They are out in the countryside, and they are, they've got their little enclaves of power built around the local synagogue, not the temple. So the Zadokites, or Sadducees, would be in charge of the temple compound and all of the rulings and legal rulings and the judicial stuff. But the Pharisees are in charge of the local synagogues and in the rural communities. So he's not really having any confrontation here with the Pharisees at this time. And they're going to inspect him, and I think we can see from the outcome of this inspection that he is a spotless lamb, ready to be sacrificed. And there's a couple of things here that I want to point out to you. You know how the city gate is often referenced as the place where the leaders meet? Now, Bethpage is the city gate of Jerusalem. So this is where the Sanhedrin meets, and you can read that in Tractate Sanhedrin. So the Sanhedrin meets in Bethpage. Also, something interesting is that Bethpage means house of unripe figs. Bethany means house of figs. And Yeshua is about to curse a fig tree. We've got some very interesting things happening here with figs. We also have a lot of interesting stuff here to get to, but I wanted to just kind of set the stage a little bit. So he's going to the gate of the city to start, and then he's going in. Okay. Now let's take a look at Luke 19 to get the parallel passage with just a little bit more information before we move to Matthew. And we'll start at Luke 19, about 29, because we're halfway through our section. So at Luke 19:29 it says, "And it came to be, when he came near to Bethphage and Bethaniah, at the Mount of Olives, that he sent 2 of his taught ones, saying, Go into the village opposite you, in which, as you enter, you shall find a colt tied, on which no one has ever sat. Loosen it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you, Why do you loosen it? Thus you shall say to him, Because the master has need of it. And those who were sent went away and found it as he had said to them. And as they were loosing the colt, the owners of it said to them, Why do you loosen the colt? And they said, The master needs it. So they brought it to Yeshua. And throwing their garments on the colt, they set Yeshua on it. And as he went, they were spreading their garments on the way. And as he was coming near, already at the descent of the Mount of Olives, the entire crowd of the taught ones began rejoicing to praise Elohim with a loud voice for all the miracles they had seen, saying, Blessed is the sovereign one who is coming in the name of Yehovah, peace in heaven and esteem in the highest. And some of the Perushim from the crowd said to him, Teacher, rebuke your taught ones. But he answering said to them, I say to you that if these shall be silent, the stones would cry out. And as he came near, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, If you only knew even today the matters for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. Because days shall come upon you when your enemies shall build a rampart around you, and surround you, and press you on all sides, and dash you to the ground, and your children within you. And they shall not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. And having entered into the set-apart place, he began to drive out those buying and selling in it, saying to them, It has been written, My house is a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. And he was teaching daily in the set-apart place. But the chief priests and the scribes and the leaders of the people were seeking to destroy him. But they did not find what they might do, for all the people were hanging upon him, listening. So there we have, in verse 44, Yeshua basically presaging the destruction of Jerusalem and horrible, horrible catastrophe which is about to happen because they did not know the time of their visitation. Now, how would you interpret that? What if they had known the time of their visitation? What would that...
Repented.
Okay, that's a good point. And I think, I don't think you could sum it up necessarily any better.
The prophecy about Jesus dying will not have been fulfilled. Because
True.
they will not crucify him.
True.
Just like Pharaoh, that God hardened so that God can do all these miracles and then Pharaoh will let them go.
Yeah.
So I don't know. what
God strengthening their hearts to reveal what's already in there. I think we've seen that in one of the parables already about the last week, when he was paying the workers out of order to reveal what was in their hearts. Yeah, that's certainly interesting. But this day of visitation, he has come, and it was prophesied in Exodus 32. In the day that I visit them, I will visit, and I will visit their sin upon them. I think that's a reference to this. And that doesn't just go back to, the sin of the golden calf necessarily, although I'm sure that's true. But he's prophesying way into the future. Let's take a look now at Matthew 21, because that's where we're starting. And get our own context and see how it's just slightly different. Just slightly.
Yeah, one with the mother, the other didn't.
So looking at Matthew 21, verses 1 through 11 is where we'll start. It says, Now when they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Yeshua sent 2 disciples, telling them, Go to the village ahead of you. Right away you will find a donkey tied there and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you are to say, Adon needs them, and he will send them at once. This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. Tell the people of Zion, Look, your king is coming to you, unassuming and seated on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So the disciples went and did as Yeshua had instructed them, and they brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road, and the crowds that went ahead of him and those who were following kept shouting, Hoshiana, to the Son of David, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of Adonai, Hoshianah in the highest." As he entered Jerusalem, the whole town, the whole city was thrown into an uproar, saying, "Who is this?" And the crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Yeshua from Nazareth in Galilee." So here, this passage from Zechariah, chapter 9, tell the people of Zion, "Look, your king is coming to you, unassuming and seated on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." This has always puzzled me. It's just some weird trivia, but how do you sit on a colt and a donkey at the same time?
Actually,
There's two different animals.
It's a
The
dog.
mother and the colt.
yeah.
Yeah, but how do you, it says they spread their cloaks on them and he sat on them. How do you sit on two animals at once?
Put them close
It
together.
says here,
That's the way I viewed it. I don't know if it's true or not, but you could sit on the bigger one and put your feet on the littler one. I have no idea.
I think that's just a mistranslation. Mine says he sat there on. I believe, what my takeaway here is that Jesus never used his miraculous power when there is a physical solution. Because I understand that a colt, if it has not been ridden on, if somebody all of a sudden rides on it, it will, but it has a mother next to it. It can be calmed down. So that's why in here, in Matthew, who knows more about maybe the practice,
Yeah.
had the mother mentioned that Jesus used the mother to ride along with the colt, to walk along with the colt.
Yeah.
So just like when Lazarus was resurrected, he didn't tell the stone to roll away. He said, "Hey guys, you roll away stone." Even the clothes, he said, "Hey, unwrap him." He didn't say, "Clothes, unwrap yourself." No,
Yeah.
because men can do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very judicial. I think it's just a lesson that we have to use our power or our resources judicially, that we don't use it unnecessarily.
Yeah, could be. I have no idea. I mean, the passage from Zechariah seems to be referencing two different animals.
Right, and ask the mother and the
Yeah.
daughter. I mean,
So I just the way it's worded here, it just made me imagine, how do you ride two animals at once? It was a stupid question. I apologize.
I never noticed that, so I'm glad that you brought it up.
yeah.
I've heard it said, I don't remember who told us, a preacher somewhere talking about this, said something about that they had never been kept apart, the mother and the young colt. And whether or not the colt was still feeding, nursing with the mother or had been weaned, it was questionable, depending on how, back then, that might not have been weaned yet.
Hmm.
But how can
And
you
so
carry
they would be
Jesus?
together.
I don't think Jesus.
That's why I don't know that
was
Jesus was riding on the colt
Yeah,
necessarily.
Not a puny man. I'm sure he.
Go ahead.
So if it's a young colt,
But it's.
and you go to pull it, and its mother's staying, it's gonna lock up, and it's not going
Right,
anywhere.
right.
That's why the mother.
And
had
the
to
mother
go
isn't
out.
gonna be
Yes.
real happy about it either.
That's
She's
why-
gonna be biting somebody.
That's the way donkeys work.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Sure.
And they are
So
very
if the mother
small.
goes, the colt.
Yeah.
They are not big, but they are very small.
And I think it's specifically for the reason of thus it would be
Yes.
fulfilled that was spoken of by the prophet, because the prophet mentions a donkey and the foal of a donkey. And so we've got to have both. We can't just have one. Whether he actually literally sat on both of them, I just imagine in my mind that he was sitting on the mother and had maybe he had one foot on the little one. I don't know. Tracy?
I think also it has something to do with the prophecy of, in Genesis 49 when he's blessing the children.
Mm-hmm.
Because Judah's blessing says, binding his foal into the vine and his ass's colt into the choice vine.
Mm.
And he washes his garment in wine and his clothes in blood of grapes. So there might be something to be seen there.
Yeah. Extra. Yes. Put that in your notes. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, the thing is too, he, by doing that, especially because of what Isaiah said, I think he was declaring his kingship.
Hmm.
Normally kings would ride triumphantly into a city, on a horse, because they're being
Well, and that's the
victorious,
conundrum that we have here, and I think that we've mentioned this before, is that the traditional Judaism sees two messiahs. Messiah ben Yosef, Messiah ben David, and that one comes riding on a donkey and is humble, and the other comes riding on a horse with the clouds, like Daniel's talking about. And
In
so,
Revelation, yes, when he comes back in the second time.
yeah, and
First
so
time he came as king of peace.
the first time he king is a king of the first time he king is king of nothing. He's a servant. He's a humble servant who is willing to
Right, but
die.
they're writing that as Messiah. They're writing the court. He was like they were putting these garments. That's an acknowledgement of his kingship.
Well, now that's questionable, because that's one of our other questions here. Is like, let's get to that in just a moment. Let's talk about that in just a moment. I want to take a look at Zechariah for just a second, and where this is actually quoted from, talking about this is not good stuff. These are prophecies of Ashkelon and Ashdod and destruction, the Jebusites, and he camps around him and presses against him with their army. And then verse 9 of chapter 9 says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. See, your sovereign is coming to you. He is righteous and endowed with deliverance, humble and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. And I shall cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the nations, and his rule is from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Also you, because of the blood of your covenant, I shall send your prisoners out of the pit." So this is, how they always do in the prophets, talking about, we have this against you, but fear not. There's hope that there's a future for you. So we have this happening in Zechariah chapter 9. And he's definitely coming to them lowly and humble and having salvation for sure. And now, taking a look at why are these people spreading out cloaks and palm branches on the road in front of Yeshua? I mean, these are kind of the activities that sound like they came from the Feast of Sukkot. I mean, are these people confused? What are they doing here? Now, if you read in Mishnah Berachot and the Talmud, you will find that this is a common practice in those days when the pilgrims were coming up to a great feast, that the people who lived in the area and the city would do that to greet pilgrims. However, this is a little different, because normally if you read the Hallel, Psalm 118, you know that they sing the different stanzas of the psalm as they're going up to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festivals. However, they've changed it this time. Things are a little bit different, because if you read in Psalm 118, it does not say Hoshiana to the son of David. They're ascribing Messianic symbolism here to their normal singing of the Hallel, the 118th Psalm. I want you to take a look at the Psalm 118, because this is absolutely fascinating. Frankly, I think so. If you look at Psalm 118, and they have definitely mixed up some stuff in this psalm, and what they're shouting is not what is normally sung. And I want to draw your attention to a couple of things here. In verse 24, let's say, I'm going to look at this in the Hebrew and kind of show you some interesting things. In verse 24, this Zechayom, this is the day Asa hath made Yehovah. We will rejoice and be glad. And this is that song that we sang when we were kids, But then the next section is, Ana Adonai. Hoshi Ana Adonai. Chaslika Na. The Ana is a strange word, which means please, now. This is almost like a cry of immediacy, help. This word Ana is translated in so many different ways. sometimes when you're praying and you don't know what to say, you just say, ah. I do that a lot. When I don't know what to say, I just say, ah. I think that is the Hebrew translation of that word. Anah.
Actually means brother.
Hmm?
Nothing.
So, when you're
He thinks you're saying brother.
in verse 25, where does that come in? What that word?
Anah is the first word, which means,
You say,
I beseech you,
"Oh, beseech."
please, Yehovah, Hoshea, save now. Please, Yehovah, prosper us. And that doesn't mean materially. Bring the kingdom is what I'm thinking of. When this prosper us kind of verbiage is not material. It's bring the kingdom now. That's literally what it says in the Hebrew. Please, Yehovah, save. We beseech you, please, Yehovah, prosper us, please. So, Hoshi'ana does not mean praise you, although we say Hosanna.
Yeah.
That's not what it means at all. It doesn't mean praise. It means please, now. And so when they're saying, please now, Son of David, Son of David does not appear anywhere in Psalm 118. So I don't know if these people are... It almost seems to me like this is a prophetic utterance. You know how the high priest Ananias, I don't remember what his name is, prophesied, that one person should die for the nation rather than the whole nation should suffer, and he prophesied that year being high priest. He didn't really know what he was saying. I almost have a vision in my head of these people singing the Hallel like they normally would, only something else is coming out. I don't know, but they're ascribing this to the Son of David, because part of that is directly straight from the Hallel, but the Son of David is definitely ascribing Messianic overtones which are not in the Psalm.
Well, I'm just looking at the wording there.
Mm-hmm.
The crowds that went ahead of him is one group, and those following.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of think the followers are like the disciples, and they had some clue, and they are the ones that kept shouting.
That's certainly
I mean,
possible.
I know there's all these grammatical ways of looking at things, and
Sure.
it's hard sometimes to tell from the translation, but I'm just looking at it that way. Maybe it was those people that were shouting that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that whoever is shouting it, that is the thing that was causing the leaders to say,
Yeah.
this is not, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's one thing to sing the Hallel because that's normal. We do that all the time as we're going up to Jerusalem for a feast. But to start talking about the Son of David, that's a clear Messianic thing. Are you saying that this guy's the Messiah? Shut these people up.
You're not, so you're saying that they are saying save now or save please or?
Yeah, something like that.
They're begging.
Yeah.
They're calling out for salvation,
Say,
Hoshea,
I beseech you now.
yeah, Hoshea is
Save.
save. So yeah, it's just the noun form of the word.
Now
Is that
Yahweh
the same
say,
word?
And
It's the same word as the prophet Hosea.
It's the same word as we're
No,
looking
no.
at in
No.
Oh no, that's
Beseech is
Hoshea
that's the now.
na.
Yahovah.
That's where you get the word Hosanna from, is Hoshea na. Save, please, or save now. Please, yeah.
and beseech
Have
you.
you heard that
Now
song that
Yahweh
Joshua
say.
Aaron has of that?
It's 561.
I mean, I hear that when you say that word. I just hear that song. The whole song is Hoshiana.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Here in the Greek, this is Hebrew.
Actually, Hoshea,
The Hebrew is 3 verses.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful in Hebrew. It's really pretty. So blessed is he who is coming in the name of the Yehovah, and we bless you from the house of Yehovah, and Yehovah is God, and he give us light, and bind the festive offering with cords to the horns of the slaughtering place. That's interesting. I think that's got some Messianic overtones, because he's going to be bound, not to the horns of the altar exactly, but I think that there's some definite Messianic overtones to Psalm 118 for sure. But they're attaching some additional significance, which is definitely causing a bit of an uproar. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Does anyone have any more comments about this welcoming of Yeshua into Jerusalem in Psalm 118? Jerry?
Oh, no, this isn't 118. I was thinking when they were singing the Hosanna and the priest or whatever told Christ to shut him up, and he said, hey, if they don't yell out, the rocks will jump up and scream.
Yeah, this has to be
That's gotta be in
proclaimed.
another book somewhere, but
Oh, it's actually coming up. Yeah,
Something about children.
yeah. They start doing it again here, just coming right up, and he says, hey, if they don't do it, the rocks will cry out. So I mean, this had to be proclaimed. You know, somebody's going to do it. Let's move forward just a little bit. Looking at Matthew 21, verses 12 through 27, we see then that Yeshua went into the set-apart place of Elohim and drove out all of those who were buying and selling in the set-apart place, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, it has been written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. And blind and lame ones came to him, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonders which he did, and the children crying out in the set-apart place, saying, Hoshiana, to the son of David, they were greatly displeased. And they said to him, do you hear what these are saying? And Yeshua said to them, yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of babes and nurslings you have perfected praise? And having left them, he went out of the city to Beth Ananiah and spent the night there. And returning to the city early in the morning, he became hungry. And seeing a single fig tree by the way, he came to it and found nothing on it but leaves, and said to it, let no fruit grow on you ever again. And immediately the fig tree withered. And the taught ones, seeing it, marveled, saying, how did the fig tree wither so soon? And Yeshua answering said to them, truly I say to you, if you have belief and do not doubt, you shall not only do what was done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be removed and be thrown into the sea, it shall be done. And whatever you ask in prayer, believing, you shall receive. And when he had come into the set-apart place, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? And Yeshua answering said to them, I shall ask you one question also, which if you answer me, I also shall say to you by what authority I do these things. The immersion of Yochanan, where did it come from? From heaven or from men? So they reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, then why did you not believe him? But if we say from men, we fear the crowd, for all hold that Yochanan was a prophet. And they answered, Yeshua said, we do not know. And he said to them, neither do I say to you by what authority I do these.
Sounded like somebody from the hearing, congressional hearing.
Yeah. Sounds like a congressional hearing. I can't remember my brains in a blender. Anyway, now why does Yeshua have this adverse reaction to the money changers and the people selling in the temple compound? Mike? Is there some rule that I'm not aware of?
What was he adverse?
Why is he having this adverse reaction to the money changers and the sellers of animals?
I have one possible thought on that, specifically about the doves that he mentions. In Acts 8:18, there's this guy named Simon that saw the apostles laying hands on people and giving the Holy Spirit, and he offered them money.
The magician dude?
Yeah, and he's saying, give me this spirit. He's trying to buy the spirit.
Mm.
And so the idea of the dove representing the Holy Spirit and them trying to sell it in the temple of God, I think there might be something to that.
Mm.
Is that you're trying to sell the Spirit of God here, kind of thing.
It's interesting.
That's the temple, queen
Yeah.
of the temple kind of thing.
Grace?
what I read is that, of course, there are so many pilgrims. This is Passover. So this is a pilgrimage feast, one of the 3 feasts in the Bible. So people cannot be bringing animals. They might die in doing it. So what happens was, this was supposed to be something to facilitate their offering. So, but they come from different countries, so they have to exchange but then it was abused. They had to exchange the money.
Well, why did they have to exchange the money?
They were trying to make money. And I understand somebody was writing that outside of the temple, the people could have bought something for, let's say, 10 cents. But when they go to the money changer, there was like 80 cents or $1. So they were really robbing the people. That's what we call you robbers. And these are pilgrims. They spend so much money to come here, from the last of they're not rich really. And instead of helping them, that was supposed to the original idea, they were not. So they were, this was not a Sabbath thing. So they could buy and sell in the temple, but because of the way they're doing it, they were actually robbing these pilgrims.
Okay. Keith?
Yeah, well, mine's similar. Yeah, so there were shenanigans going on. They were paying the Sadducees some kickbacks to be up there on the temple Mount to do their business. And they were raising their prices, and then when you had to do the exchange for the temple coinage, so you could buy stuff, they were, manipulating the money and everything. So yeah, he knew the whole thing, what was in their hearts and how they were making money off of people, and instead of it just being straightforward, value for value, they were ripping them off. So.
Okay, Jerry?
And it was prophesied that Jesus will go into that.
Jerry?
Will do that.
One of the things they had to do was a temple tax, which was a half a shekel. And if you came from a foreign country, the money that you were going to exchange had the emperor's crown on it, or his figure on it. You could not put money in the temple that had a deity on it.
Yes.
So you had to exchange that
Right.
for Hebrew money, whatever kind of money they had. So if you gave a half a shekel of, say, Roman money, you didn't get a half a shekel back because they charged interest on it. And so therefore you were not able to give God his half shekel that he required. That's one of the reasons. The big reason is because of the image of the emperors on all of the coins from the different countries.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, that's what my research has shown, yeah.
I saw an example where there was a rabbi on TV talking about that issue of the people would bring their own offering. It would be inspected by the priest. He would condemn their offering as defective.
So you would buy it.
And here's mine. Why do they have all those animals? They have all those animals. So take yours away. Here's ours.
That's a good
And
in-
the price
yeah.
of it.
That certainly could have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think that Jerry brought up something really interesting. If you read in Tractate Sanhedrin and some of the other Mishnah, you can see that yes, the Roman emperor's image is stamped on that coin, and they don't allow that into the temple compound.
I think there's nothing wrong with it, but the thing is, they were robbing because they're costing them.
Yeah. There's nothing in the Torah which would say you can't use money from the nations to purchase things. But they had a thing about idolatry and putting a man's, and I can understand that. If they want to make a ruling saying, hey, no foreign coins in the temple, then I can understand that. That's fine. Only they allowed the Roman coins into the temple because this is taking place in the temple. So they're changing this money, huh? It's in the courtyard. That's in the temple compound. Yeah, in the temple compound. Now here's the thing too. Jerry was talking about they're basically doing arbitrage. They're changing money. They're changing currency. Now if you are saying this Roman denarius is worth so many shekels and you are not giving a fair exchange rate, that's essentially what? That's usury.
Yes.
You're charging more.
Right.
You're like interest.
Right.
You can't charge usury to your brethren.
Right.
And also, where is it written in the Torah anywhere that it's okay to set up a market in the court of the tabernacle?
Actually, that was being done, I understand, from the court of the Gentiles. This can be done there, or even the lame and the blind can also just be there in Gentiles. So the rest of the temple was holy. But this was
Well,
not.
think about the tabernacle, okay? We're talking about the enclosure of the curtain Then you got the building inside the curtain. So I don't see anywhere in the Torah where it is described that inside that curtain you set up a marketplace. No. We've got a marketplace set up inside the curtain. All of that stuff should be happening in the city, outside of I'm not talking about just the Holy of Holies and the holy place. I'm talking, this text is referring it to the set apart place. That does include the court of the Gentiles, but that's part of the temple compound. This is a place of worship. He says, this is supposed to be a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves. They're selling and have converted the temple compound into a marketplace. This is never mentioned in the Torah. This is supposed to take place outside of this. This is a house of prayer. It is turned into a house of exchange and a house of robbery and people switching animals and selling things. This is, you don't want to turn the temple of God into a busy bazaar. That's why he is getting this is the only time that we're ever told that he gets physical. He makes a whip out of cords twice. He's overturning their tables and releasing the animals, and if you saw Desmond do it, it was pretty cool, man. No, he didn't. Keith, go ahead. Sorry, buddy.
No, that just shows his passion for this. He did it his first visit.
Yeah.
And he does it the second visit.
Yep.
How is consistent.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And he is feeling, zeal for your house has consumed me. They have turned his house into a marketplace.
Yeah.
It's horrifying, really.
From my studies, it seems like the high priest is the one that was the one that rented all of the places on the
Oh, sure.
temple court, and all of the little stalls where people sold, he owned all of those, and he rented them out to the people to do this and do that. And this month before Passover and the other feasts, he would double his prices.
Wow.
And he
Oh,
would
sure.
make a big kill in those 2 months out there. The rest of the year had a different price. We do in this country.
And you can see in Solomon's temple that all around the outside of the temple compound is administrative offices for the priests. The business of the temple was conducted there, but not as a marketplace. This is the business of the priests had their offices and storehouses and chambers of, storing wealth and the things that people brought in, and places to store the skins that are taken from the animals to make Torah scrolls and, wicks and all kinds of different stuff. But there's no profiteering supposed to be going on here.
There's the word profiteering.
Yeah, there's definitely, the priests, they shouldn't be involved in that really necessarily at all. You figure there'd be plenty of merchants in the city that'll sell you an animal that is without blemish so that you can take it up or change your money into something that's acceptable in the temple,
The money Jim Baker.
Yeah, that's right. So, that's quite a deal going on there with him overturning the money changers getting.
Didn't Capias, whatever his name was, the high priest,
Ananias?
didn't he buy his high priestship from Caesar in Rome?
That's what we've heard, yeah.
5 of them, so that there was one for every one of his sons, so they kept it going for a few years.
Yeah, it's certainly what I have understood.
Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have historical proof of that, although that does seem to be the common understanding is that the priests in charge at that time were not of the sons of Aaron.
Life's bitter.
But I thought that's why they were called Sadducees, because they were supposed to be from the line of Zadok.
Yeah, theoretically that's true. Although I think the Romans and the Roman governors had basically made it a political office that you could purchase. And maybe these people were from the house of Zadok, but had purchased it. Maybe they were not supposed to be in the line of succession, or something like that. Maybe they were Zadokites, but the wrong one. You know what I'm saying? They had money, so they purchased it because they were eligible. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. But clearly something was going on there which should not have been. Grace?
For my sake, would you explain?
Explain what?
Zadok must have been in the tribe of Levi.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, Zadok was the only priest that was faithful to David when Absalom, his son, rebelled and tried to take over the kingdom. And so God said, the sons of Zadok shall never have a man lacking to serve me. And so that's where you get the word Sadducee, is from Zadokim.
I thought it was because they didn't believe in the resurrection.
They were Sadducee. Yeah, no, it's Zadokim is translated into Sadducees. That's from the tribe of Levi, the house of Zadok. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I just had a thought. Can I
Please,
share?
yes, please do.
I'm thinking spiritually here, cleansing this temple, Messiah cleansing the temple, and if we are this temple, and he comes by his sacrifice, we know that is what he was doing, was cleansing his house of sin.
Mm-hmm.
So he's cleansing this temple. And then it's this idea, this ties back to Jeremiah 7:11, which is what it's quoting.
Mm-hmm.
In this house which is called by my name, is this house which is called by my name become a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, even I have seen it, saith Yahuwah. But what he says right before that is what made me think is, Messiah cleansed the house of sin, not so that we could continue in sin, but that we could turn from it and return to the Torah, which is what Jeremiah is all about.
Yeah.
And he says right before this, he says, will you steal, murder, commit adultery, and swear falsely, and burn incense unto Baal, and walk after other gods whom you know not, and come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, we are delivered to do all these abominations.
We are delivered to do all these abominations.
And then he says, you've made this a house of, this become a den of robbers.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I had actually intended to do that, to go to the passages where he was quoting that, because one of them is from Isaiah 56, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but then Jeremiah 7:11, you have made it a den of robbers. Yeah, it'd be interesting, and I would put that in your notes. If we had more time, we could, go into that a little bit more. But I think Tracy has brought up an excellent point. You could put into your notes to review Isaiah 56 and Jeremiah 7 in relation to house of prayer, den of robbers, and what is going on there, because I think that you have a good insight regarding this, spiritual cleansing to turn so that you can do what is right, and that he is purifying the house and came to
That's
purify.
I think that whole parable about the unclean spirits and the house was
Waterless
cleansed,
places.
And then that has some stuff I can probably pull
I
out
remember-
off the top of my head, but it's just that this idea of those, it comes and gets more, because if you go back to sin after being cleansed from it, you are that much worse. The punishment is worse. That's what that whole thing, when it says on the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, someone who transgresses Moses is put to death or whatever it is.
Yep.
How much worse will be those who trample on the Son of Man. So it's saying, you screwed up here, now the Son of Man is coming to cleanse this house. If you screw up again, the punishment is going to be much worse.
Yeah, and I think you can clearly see that. I was talking to about this subject with the children, last night, and it's the tremendous amount of suffering that our brethren have undergone since the time of Yeshua is just crazy. Yeah. Absolutely crazy. I mean, the Romans come and destroy their temple, kill 1 million of them, spread the rest of them out across the world, where all through the Middle Ages they're treated like filth and vermin, forced to convert to Christianity in a lot of cases. When the 20th century comes around, you got Hitler killing 6 million of them. You got, the Russians killing even more than that. 10, 11 million. So, it has been tough.
You never hear of it, huh?
No, you only hear of Hitler. You don't. Stalin killed more Jews than Hitler for sure. But talk about rough. The punishment for, and I know that traditional Christianity would say, well, they crucified their Messiah. That's what you get. It goes beyond that. The rabbis themselves will tell you that Solomon's temple was destroyed because of idolatry. They say the temple in the days of Yeshua, and all of the bad things that happened thereafter, were because of hatred without a cause. Hatred without a cause. That's what they ascribe it to themselves. And I think there's something to that.
And that was much worse because of how long it's been.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were out without Solomon's temple. Between the destruction of Solomon's temple and it being rebuilt by Hezekiah, it wasn't very
70
long.
years, you know.
And now they've been 2,000 years without it, so they say that's why they say that's the most evil generation it must be because of.
Yeah, and you can read that they will actually tell you, that the rabbis themselves will tell you that the the people in this time was the most wicked generation.
The history of the demon possessions even, and they were saying that God has taken away His protection from them, so they were so sick,
The leaders.
and so much demon possession,
Yeah.
and the priests were just evil.
You know, and yeah, and you know, here's a good thing that you want to remember, and I think that this is so apropos about how you have been talking about, you know, praying for our leaders and you know, the Donald Trump and everything. We see, and I put this in my notes here somewhere, that they're afraid of the crowds.
Yeah.
The leaders are afraid of the crowds, but they're going to get their way. The people they don't seem that bad. A lot of them do believe, and a lot of them are giving him respect. Some of them, like when he's in John chapter 6 or 7, you know, he's like, all these people following him. Well, they were following for the wrong reasons, but they did follow him, and they believed there was something special about this guy. But the leadership in particular seems to be particularly evil and wicked and hypocritical. But note that everyone suffered because of the leadership, the evil leadership. That's a difficult thing because, and you can see that in the Torah, that if your leadership is wicked, you're going to suffer. And sometimes you want to think to yourself, well, we got the leader that we deserve. Well, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't get the leader you deserve. And sometimes that leader, I mean, think about David numbering the people in the book of Judges and in the book of First Chronicles. And he's, you know, God's like, well, you've got a choice. You can I can have your enemies have lordship over you for 6 months and destroy, or I can send the angel of death. So because David himself decided to count the people, thousands were killed. Why? Because of the leadership. This leadership is so wicked that millions are killed and scattered all over the planet and have been ever since. That's a really difficult thing to hear, especially living in our own country where we've had, you know, crazy leadership and the things that we've suffered from. I mean, frankly, it hasn't been as bad as it could have been, but it makes you wonder about what might be coming in the future when you look at the leadership that we have and what they've gotten us into and what could potentially come of all the trouble that they've caused. Grace?
When I saw on the news, just to put it the way it's been hitting me the last 2 days, couple of days, saw that woman beheaded because her husband accused her of killing their 9-year-old child. And over, I don't remember where it was, Iraq or something. And it was right on, they videoed it. It was right on the video. At the same, almost the same time as all the women in our country were doing this obscene stuff in the streets.
Those are paid protesters.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it makes me wonder, the thing that made me think of it now is, we say, well, we haven't had it that bad here in the States. But there are Christians and Jewish people that are absolutely, we don't understand the horrific situations they're in.
That's very true.
Hundreds and hundreds of thousands. It's got to be in the millions.
Yeah. Yeah. In countries like China and Korea and Muslim countries, Egypt, I know that the Coptic Christians in Egypt are suffering terribly. Yeah, that's true. We seem to be in a little insulated bubble here, and who knows when that bubble will pop.
Yeah.
It's got to pop. I can't imagine that we're going to be protected through all that.
For the last 16 years?
Yeah, it's amazing that we are where we are, frankly. And we can give thanks to God, but we need to also be on our toes a little bit, praying for our leaders. And you know that Bill Cloud likes to say continuously, if my people who are called by my name will pray, then I will heal their land. It doesn't say all of them. And that turn from their wicked ways. If my people will turn from their wicked ways. Yeah, he's not telling you to pray for your leaders and pray for the unsaved. He says, if you guys will do what you're supposed to, then I will heal your land. That's quite a promise.
The revival starts.
That's when the revival starts.
Where there's already life.
That's right.
You don't revive the dead.
That's true. That's
Well,
true.
I think Pence, his Bible is marked to that
Yeah.
passage.
Trump's Bible, Reagan's Bible, that was being read from at Trump's inauguration was open to that passage. If these people who are called by my name in Chronicles, that's interesting, isn't it?
It's also interesting that was inauguration week, and that was our Bible verse at school. Totally unrelated, like it's just like,
Totally unrelated, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like planned. Is what I mean. It's like just crazy.
Yeah,
But there's no
absolutely.
God,
I want to just, I know that we're running a little bit low on time here. I want to talk with you briefly about this fig business.
business.
briefly.
After you're done.
Actually, Angela would like to talk with you a little bit about this fig business. Well, you said you had something you wanted to talk about that's kind of tied together, so if you want to address it, I will digress.
I don't know.
Let me get you started.
I'm going to try to say something that makes sense, and if I don't, I'm really sorry. Because I'm trying to sort this out right here, because it's like 5 chapters apart, and there's 2 books involved. But, Alan was saying this thing about the day of visitation, and that it's almost like a trial. It's almost like when I was teaching, and the principal came in to do my yearly observation. If I wasn't prepared, it was not a good visitation. If I wasn't prepared, that was a great visitation, right? But this whole idea of the day of visitation and the fig thing, because he comes to the house of unripe figs, Beth Page, and then he goes to the house of figs, Beth Tamid, and then he curses a fig tree, and that's boom, boom, boom. That's happening one right after another right there. And when he curses the fig tree, he says, they said, why did it wither so quick? And he says, when he responds to them, you will even say to this mountain, be lifted up and moved into the middle of the sea. And there's another book where we have unripe figs and we have mountains being hurled into the sea. And when I went back to Revelation, where this is happening, if you look at the 6th seal, this is a day of visitation here. This day of visitation is going to happen again, and I think that there's almost some echoes of it in what's going on here in Matthew. That this is a forerunner, and their temple being burnt to, I'm going to come and burn everything. Your great day of visitation for the whole world, because the 6th seal, there's an earthquake, the sun becomes black, the stars fall to the earth as the
Which chapter are you in?
I'm in chapter 6, verse 12, 13, 14.
Okay.
Stars,
Revelation 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
The stars fall to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings hide themselves in the rocks and say, fall on us, protect us, or hide us from the presence of him. The great day of wrath has come, who is able to stand. This sounds like the next great day of visitation. And when you start looking back in Matthew with this fig tree and mountain business, there's another place where something happens and the disciples ask him about it, and he says, if you have faith like a mustard seed, you could move this mountain from here to there. Not mountain into the sea, but moving a mountain from here to there. And that is after, remember when I taught, we did the fire and the water, and it was at the transfiguration, throwing himself into the midst of the fire and the water. And if you look right after what I just read in Revelation, it's the first trumpet, which is hail and fire. Remember his great plague in Egypt, the one he referred to as a special one that encompassed all his plagues, was the one with hail and fire. So that's the next thing happening in Revelation. And then if you go to the second trumpet, after your hail and fire, you have a great mountain burning with fire thrown into the sea. Not only that, but if you think millstone, remember the millstone thing we just covered? Babylon and the millstone happens in Revelation. So I'm wondering if you did a study on some of these little sayings like this, if they would fit into here. And then on top of that, and I would love somebody to do this, in Psalms, and I was looking at this week because he was looking at Psalms 118. You know you have Psalms 119, and it's all about the Torah and the Word, or Yeshua, okay, spiritually. The Psalms before that, he was calling them the Hallel. They're the Psalms of praise, which they were singing while they were approaching Jerusalem. Do you know the next set of Psalms, if you look in your Bibles, even my NASB, before each of those Psalms there, I think up to 130 or so, it's called a song of ascent, because there was those 14 stairs going up into the temple, and they would say the first Psalm, and they would take a step, and they would say the next one, and take a step, and say the next one. If you read those almost sound like, I've seen this in my head, you have all this stuff happening in Revelation, the trumpets, the bowls, all this terrible stuff. Those psalms almost sound like
Recitation of
what the saints would be saying in the middle of all this as they're protected under his wings. The language and the imagery that are used in those psalms seem like a retort to, and almost in such a way, like if we could memorize, if we knew we were going to go through that, I would memorize those. And that's what I would be thinking and saying in the middle of all of this horribleness. Anyway,
Excellent.
That's all.
No, that's most excellent. Excellent. Hold on just one sec. I want to bring to your attention, and you can just put this in your notes. I had put this at the end of the presentation, but it kind of relates to what you were talking about. And this is not from me. This is from L. Grant Luton. If you want to take a look at this, comparing and contrasting the mountains and the mustard seeds and the fig trees from Matthew chapter 17 and Matthew chapter 21, you get some very interesting parallels here with the disciples asking questions like, why could we not cast it out? And hey, how did that fig tree wither so quickly? And you got a plant involved, a mustard seed. If you have faith like a mustard seed, and if you have faith, you can do this to the fig tree. And they were coming down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and they were coming down from the Mount of Olives. In this section in Matthew 17, they were calling him the son of Elohim. Here they're calling him the son of David. It was a private event versus a public event. In that section, he's driving out a demon. In this section, he's driving out merchants and money changers. In that section, the mountain moves. In this section, the mountain is thrown into the sea and is destroyed.
Standing on when he comes back, it splits in half.
The Mount of Olives.
Olives, okay.
So this is very interesting, and I think that this is potentially two parts of a menorah pattern, maybe a chiasm, a chiastic structure. I would maybe consider looking at that. Very interesting to compare and contrast those two things. Now, in relation to figs, Mark chapter 11, verse 12 indicates in the parallel passage that the text actually notes that it was not the time for figs. It's like, well, what's he going looking for figs for if there's no figs? Now, you have figs at your house, right? So, yes, tell us about figs.
When I was reading the Bible, that really puzzled me. Why would Jesus have such a violent, not violent, but I think there's a reason they're spiritual. we have figs in the house, and these figs, when the leaves are lush, they smell so good. Every single branch has lots of fruit at the end. It seems like but now that it's winter time, it lost all the leaves, no fruit. The fruit that remain dried up and can't be eaten. So I was thinking, when there are leaves, because you can see the fruit from afar right away, it seems to tell you that there are fruits. So I don't know if that's true, that it was not the time of the figs, because Jesus is not unreasonable. I would think that if there are leaves, there should be fruit.
Well, you know what's
Some kind
interesting?
of a deception, because supposedly if you have leaves with all this photosynthesis and everything, you should have fruits. And
Yes.
there was none.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, you've got figs on your tree right now, but they're old, right?
They didn't, yeah.
The fruit doesn't fall off the tree. The leaves fall, but the
Yes.
fruit is still there, right?
Yeah, but they're not edible.
Well, now, according to my research, they are edible. They might look
I
disgusting.
tried. It's like eating leather. I have to spit it out. The taste
Okay,
is
well,
no
now,
good.
according to my research, I don't know whether this is true just in the area that they're in there or if this is a different kind of a fig tree. I'm not sure. But according to the research that I saw, there is fruit on that tree that is edible year round. Now, it may be underripe and you can eat it and it will not hurt you and it will give you sustenance. It may be overripe and practically rotten, but you can eat it and it will not hurt you and it will give you sustenance. And that this is a mysterious thing to come upon this fig tree that has nothing on it, which is a rather unusual thing. Well, some of the people that I have read thought that perhaps this fig tree was a parable of the leadership of Israel at that time, because they are, and you see, now here's the thing. They called Bethpage the house of unripe figs and put the Sanhedrin there because they said that if the figs in the garden that Adam and Eve had covered their nakedness with had been unripe, maybe they wouldn't have eaten them. And they thought that maybe the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a fig tree.
I thought so too.
So they called their house where they met the house of unripe figs, so that they wouldn't be tempted by figs that were unripened. I don't know, but I think it's interesting that you've got this fig tree that has no fruit on it, that might represent, it's got leaves, it's receiving the light from the light, which is the Spirit, coming down, and the leaves are covering the sin, but there's no fruit. And he says you judge them by their fruit. Well, there is no fruit. They've got the appearance of a tree that's doing okay, but there's no fruit there.
I heard a pastor explain that as they took the leaves and they sewed them together themselves
Mm-hmm.
to hide their nakedness.
Right.
And what did God do later?
An animal.
He killed, blood was shed.
Blood was shed.
What was the deal about Cain and Abel? He was offering with vegetables, it was the work of his own hands. His self-righteousness.
That's possible. Angela?
And then Abel offered blood.
And now the rabbis actually look at it a little bit differently and say he offered the fat, the firstlings, the best, and that Cain grabbed some stuff at random and put together a haphazard kind of, Angela and then Tracy?
If he withered that tree, he has taken away their religious coverings to cover their sin, because those leaves aren't going to work anymore.
That's an
He
excellent
basically
insight.
exposed them.
That's
Like
good.
he would if you were putting them on top.
Fair enough, yeah.
Just an interesting thought about what Darren was saying about the two offerings is that it also says that Abel brought also, so it implies that he also brought fruit and a sacrifice. Fruit represents what? Works.
Mm-hmm,
So we look at it that way. Maybe Cain was trying to be, like you said, self-righteous. Here are my works. Look what I've done.
Yeah, he
But
made
Abel
acceptance
brought
in his own
the
work.
blood of a lamb, let's say, and works.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
you have to have both.
Yeah. Kind of like James is talking about.
Through faith.
Yeah.
What? It can't just be you. It's got to be through Messiah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Do you mind if we go a couple of extra minutes? I know we got started a couple of minutes late, and I just have one more thing that I'd like to share. You know, reading this passage, and we've read this before because I was just showing you in verse 15 or 17, comparing to 21, about him saying, "Man, if you had faith like a mustard seed, or if you have just a little bit of faith, you'll be able to say, you know, to this fig tree, but you'll be able to wither the fig tree and you'll be able to move this mountain." You know, we've talked about that before, and I wanted to just kind of throw out there this reference in James chapter 2 and chapter 5 about Elijah being a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it didn't rain for 3 years and 6 months, and then he prayed again and it rained. Now, I think that is our example, because you know I've said to you before that I believe that the book of James is a commentary on the book of Matthew, that James is telling us what it means when Yeshua is saying, if you have this much faith, you'll be able to ask and you will receive. Remember, James says you ask and you don't receive because you ask and ask wrongly to spend it on your pleasures. But he gives then Elijah as an example of someone who has a nature like ours and prays and gets his prayers answered. What is the difference? Why? How did Elijah pray? And what did he pray for? And why did he pray for it? And why did it work? Angela?
Because it's already prophesied that that's what was going to happen. So all Elijah was asking for was what God said he would do.
I think that's exactly right. That's what it means to pray in his name. It does not mean that we tack on, in the name of Yeshua, we ask these things. It means if you are praying in his name, you are in his name. You are one with him. You are asking for things that he himself would ask for.
Yes.
And so when Elijah prayed that it would not rain for 3.5 years, he was asking for something that God had already said he would do. If you read in Deuteronomy chapters 30, 31, 32, he is very specific what will happen if you violate my instructions and you do not follow my instructions. You'll have no rain. But if you do and you repent and you do what he says, rain and the crops grow. And there's all these other things, but Elijah is asking specifically for God to fulfill his promise. And therefore, he wasn't asking for something for himself. He's saying, God, do what you said you were going to do so that these people will know. And therefore, this is what Yeshua is talking about. But we have so many twisted, weird ideas about we can pray for this in his name and that in his name and we can move mountains. And, I think that these are definitely metaphorical, because we know that fig tree is representing something else. I think that the mountain is also representing something else. He's not telling us literally that anything we want, we can just ask for it and it'll be given to us. I don't believe that, and you frankly know that from your experience, because you don't get the prayers answered that you'd like to have in the way that you'd like to have them, when you'd like to have them, to the degree that you'd like to have them. It does not hardly ever work that way. And I think that, some of the people that I have listened to lately have had some good insight on this and say, look, man, we pray, the Hebrew prayer versus Christian prayer is a completely different thing. It's completely different. And I think that you should check into that and look at that, because Hebrew prayer is vastly different than Christian prayer. And I think it's instructive, because Hebrew prayer is about envisioning yourself through the reading of Psalms. That's why they generally will a lot of times pray Psalms. But Christians have this weird thing about canned prayer. It's like, I can't pray a prayer that's canned. I got to speak from my heart. And God, please, yes, there is a place for that. There's no question about that. But the Hebrews envision God answering what he has promised.
Yeah.
And it's a different thing. Yes,
Lining up your will with it.
Yes, it's about, that's what Hebrew prayer is about, is you lining yourself up with Him, not asking Him to line up with you. Different thing altogether.
What the word says.
And yes,
So you have to study that
yes,
word.
and that is exactly what is being spoken of here, and I think that's what James is commenting on this, with giving us the example of Elijah. James chapter 5, at the very end of chapter 5. Grace?
Talking about rain,
Yes,
throughout the Bible, it's a blessing.
absolutely.
No rain is a curse.
Absolutely.
Here in America, when it rains, they are so angry. They're so... I said, what happened to this Christian nation?
Yeah.
No kidding, even
Yeah.
at churches. When it rains,
Yeah, people don't go to church when it rains. Tracy?
I'm gonna try to do a high level here, but,
Yes, please.
so the mountain in this section, I think, quite possibly represents Babylon. The kingdoms are mountains, we know from Daniel. The fig tree, I'm of the opinion that is most likely was the knowledge of good and evil was a fig tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that when he cursed it, said, let no one eat fruit from you ever again, I think is prophetic in that sense. But specifically this is about Jerusalem and Judah. And you can look and connect the figs and the fig tree to Judah. And like I mentioned before in Jeremiah, he's talking about Jerusalem and Judah, the two baskets of figs. Some were so bad they can't be eaten, and some were good. And those are the good and the bad Jews, if you will,
Right.
in Jerusalem at the time. So this is Babylon. It's confusion by mixing, which went all the way back to the garden. And it's Revelation 18:21, when the mighty angel took a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, thus with violence the great city Babylon will be thrown down and shall not be found anymore. Which sounds like what we're reading right here. Is that you can say this mountain, through faith, which is hearing the word of God, comes by hearing the word of God, you be thrown down into the sea, and it will be so. And that's the same thing he says to what we read earlier, when we're quite into the tales of it. He's talking about giving a cup of cold water to one of these little ones. I wrote about this just yesterday, so I keep looking at my ones. It's so crazy we're talking about this right now because this just came up. So I'm going to send this out in my little
Please.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the cup of cold water, he talks about these little ones, if they don't get the cold water, representing the word again, that it's better than to have a millstone around their neck and thrown into the sea. Confusion by mixing, I know I'm not making sense, but it's all tied together to this idea of Babylon. And that's where Jerusalem went into captivity in Jeremiah for not hearing, keeping, and doing the Torah, the word of God. And it says in Jeremiah that the nation sent little ones for water, and they found none. I'd never thought that before. They came out empty and confounded. So
Interesting.
it's all connected.
Well, I'm interested to see your paper that you send out tomorrow.
If anybody wants to be out of the mailing list, so.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of new people here that haven't maybe been on the list, so get in touch with Tracy and get on that list. Well, I think let's wrap up. We've gone just a little bit over what we normally do, but we got started late, so I think we're okay. Let us pray. Thank you, guys. Good discussion tonight. Good discussion.